Welcome back, folks. We are today dealing with another apocalyptic work, this one called The Apocalypse of Zephaniah. It's mainly a Jewish work, and so it digs into some of the ideas of early Jewish understandings of the afterlife, divine punishment, realms of heaven and hell, which are the kinds of themes that get built upon during the Christian era. This work is pseudepigrapha, which means it's purported to be written by Zephaniah the prophet, but it obviously isn't, because it was sometime in either the 1st century BC through the 1st century AD, somewhere through that range. The next work we look at will be in the similar range also. Now, we only know about it in the Coptic language, which is essentially Egyptian with Greek letters to capture that language. We are taken on a trip through heaven and hell in a vision state, which is essentially the same sort of genre that we end up with the book of Revelation, for instance, many other of these apocalyptic works, and an angel as a guide and all the rest. But basically going through heaven and hell and trying to understand the difference between what gets someone there and also the state of judgment. How long does it take to be judged? These sorts of things that work themselves out in this text. So in the text, we see these various different views of heaven and hell, and also visions of the judgment of souls, like how that process takes place. And I'll give you an example of some of the things that stand out. But there's also very strong anti-idolatry stance, which makes sense in the Jewish context, right? It was one of the problems that plagued them for the longest period of time, or at least the Hebrew people. And so idolatry becomes sort of the hinge, whether you would swing one way or the other in the afterlife. It is like the thing that is the most important, I think, that anyone would get when reading it. So the way this works is he sees the souls being judged, and the soul is there, and God judges that soul immediately upon death. And so he's given sort of a front row seat to something that's behind the scenes, where someone has died and the soul is there, and now it's going to be judged whether or not they were righteous or unrighteous. And the key here again is about idolatry. And so if you were idolatrous, then you get consigned to hell and severely punished. However, if you were righteous and you kept yourself clean and you were doing what you were supposed to do, following the commands of God, you were given new garments, and they were absolutely gleaming and shining. I mean, the image that comes to my mind is like a performer on stage with a sequenced gown or something like that, where there are all these glimmering kinds of jeweled garment that reflects the light of God, in a sense, like the righteousness that was contained within. But there's one important scene that shows a soul who's trying to hide its sins, and this process is absolutely unsuccessful. He's not able to hide sins, and it shows then that God sees those sins anyway, and sins are exposed, they're brought to light, and judgment happens in spite of the fact of trying to hide sins. And so, it shows this idea of God's omniscience, that he absolutely is powerful and that he can see all things, whether or not you want him to see it or not. There isn't a place to hide. There isn't anywhere that you can go to escape the judgment of God. You die, and then immediately you are judged. So essentially, you must have an absolutely clear rejection of idolatry. If you don't have a clear rejection of idolatry, there's going to be problems, at least from the perspective of the Apocalypse of Zephaniah. Also, along the way, he meets these angels whom he has names for, and some of these angels actually intercede on behalf of these souls. And so we get a different picture of sort of angelology, or the understanding of hierarchy of angels and divine beings that's present in this apocalypse. And some of those ideas, I think, are capitalized in other writings, and you can see how one of these documents sort of influences the other, or presupposes that you already know about the other document. I think even the book of Revelation sort of hints at things from other books that John assumes people would have read or understood, or at least known about in some way. This is one of just a few books that gives any kind of picture about or reflects any kind of Jewish understanding of the afterlife and what that means. Mostly, the accounts that we get of an afterlife from a Jewish perspective are sort of vague. Biblically, David saying, "I know you're not going to leave me in the pit," things like that. We got depictions of Sheol, but they're not very graphic in the sense that we don't have uh, you know, very good details, and some of those details are actually included in this apocalypse. And so, in some ways, it's similar to, say, First Enoch or the Apocalypse of Abraham, which both depict an idea of a Jewish afterlife and how that would work out. How does divine mercy and divine judgment work itself out? Where's the balance in all of these things? Essentially, God is the one who's deciding how divine justice will be meted out, and all those things are shown to be absolutely worked out. So there isn't a question of God trying to decide whether or not justice will be administered. There's justice one way or the other, whether you're righteous or not, and God has made that determination. And once again, a lot of it hinges on the idea of idolatry. Another issue that comes up here is that there is an absolute lack of any understanding of a messianic figure. Most of the apocalyptic literature has the idea of some Messiah figure who comes to save the day, right? If it's Christian, then it's going to be Jesus, or some of them being purported to be written by Jews, but have a Christian bent, which show Jesus. And there's other Jewish and Hebrew writings that have messianic figures, or the awaiting of a messianic figure who's going to make all things right in the end. But this book actually lacks that. It's something that sort of stands out in the sense that it isn't there. The emphasis then is on righteousness and how one must live with absolute integrity. And the reason you have to have this absolute integrity and character is because you can't hide sins from God, right? As mentioned earlier, they will be found out, they'll be brought to light, and you will still be judged. So you need to stay away from any form of idolatry at all. This writing and other writings like it helped to shape sort of the theological milieu that was present in the first century, and sets up, if you will, the various different sects of Christianity that develop, and I think especially those that, say, someone like Paul would have confronted those known as essentially the Judaizers, the ones who wanted people to conform to the law. These ideas were certainly circulating everywhere. They were present, and this emphasis on righteousness sort of, I think, highlights also sort of a Pharisaic understanding of the text and the nature of what it meant to follow God. Not so much in the sense of, say, a Sadducee or another temple worker, because the idea of animal sacrifice is not the center. The center of it is in behavior and obedience, which is something that the prophets would have said, right? That obedience is better than sacrifice. And therein is the core of the message of this text. If you're enjoying this series, drop a like, a comment, ask a question, and subscribe if you've not already done so. And see you guys next time.